Boy, Dan, it's good to hear those old tinging keys of the Road Common Good podcast theme song. It's been a while. Doug Pagitt here, December 6th, 2021, in here with Dan Deitrich. And, I've been gone, feels like forever. So nice to be back.
Yeah, back in the saddle.
And welcome to Back in the Saddle. I get it. You're making a riding joke, aren't you? Hey, it's Ride Week here on the Vote Common Good podcast. It's, that's a little homage to Shark Week on, I don't know what it was, Discovery Channel. And of course, a little wink at Infrastructure Week that the Trump administration could never pull off, but the Biden team has figured out. So it's going to be Ride Week here. We're going to talk all things we the people for common good immigration and border policy. Ride.
Yeah,
which we spent 9 weeks doing, and that was 3 weeks ago that we finished. And so the 4 months of or 3 months of getting ourselves from start to finish till this point, and this will be the first chance that we've really had to reflect on it. So we're going to spend all week talking about the ride. Now, lest you think, hey, well, who wants to listen to a bike ride podcast, for 5 installments? It's going to be different pieces to it. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the ride itself. Lots of questions that people have and have asked along the way about how the ride itself was and went, what we experienced and all. So that'll be today. Tomorrow, we'll talk about the politics of immigration and border policy. Where does that sit on our politics conversation? On Wednesday, we're going to shine a light on all the faith groups that are actually doing the humane work along the border. Our governmental policies are creating crises and then having to be cleaned up by small nonprofits, oftentimes faith groups. We think that's something worth pointing out, both to cheer them on and to prod our society to do it better, because it doesn't make sense that we ask for nonprofit groups who have to raise money to fix the problems created by our government. Mm-hmm. Government might not be the solution to all of our problems, but it ought not be the problem. And in this particular case, I think that's what's going on. So that'll all be on Wednesday. On Thursday, we're going to talk about the whole role of activities in activism. Now, we're not the only group that does actions like this, where you put together an activity or a stunt of some kind or a project to raise awareness around activism. But we want to talk a bit about that and how people can be involved in those kinds of things. So that'll be Thursday, not just our ride, but the other people that do this kind of work. And then on Friday, some practical ways that you as a community or an individual or a faith group could be involved in what's going on the border. And then some conversation about what might be some possible hopeful moments that could exist for changes in how we interact on the around immigration and border policy. But today we're going to focus on the ride itself and what took place on the ride, how it went, all those kinds of things. Dan and I were both riders, so we will be sharing our own reflection and talking about what we experienced, but also trying to share what other people who are along the ride had experienced. And so we're going to get into, if you have comments or questions, you can put them here in the chat if you're watching this live. If you're just listening on the audio version only, by the time you hear this, we're already done talking about it. So you can't do it. Dan, how about you? How have you been thinking about the ride? You came down on 2 different occasions and hopped on the bikes and made yourself along. Do you have any quick reflections on how that has sat with you as you sat on a bike riding across Arizona and then Florida?
Yeah, a lot of reflections since we got done, and so I did, I think, about 500 miles total between Arizona, New Mexico, and then a little leg in Florida. And I think the stretch through New Mexico was the most impactful for me. It's just so much nothing out there. Like, it's just vast, empty landscapes, and you can't imagine people surviving out there. We had obviously bikes and a support vehicle with water and food if we needed it. But this is a stretch of desert where thousands of people come through on foot to try and find a better life in America. And every day we would see Border Patrol picking up people. And so just riding through that landscape, seeing how inhospitable it was, and realizing that this was a place where thousands of people attempted to come to America and many die in that desert. being there in person and feeling the heat and seeing the landscape was just really impactful, really eye-opening.
Yeah, I agree. Just this last week, we had to move one of the vehicles that we used in RV that lives in California with the person who lent it to us. So we had to drive it back from Florida to California. So now, then 2 weeks after having ridden for 9 weeks from west to east, I flew back down, got in an RV with Brandon Pfeiffer, and we drove the vehicle back to California and went fast. We left Florida at 2 p.m. on Monday and arrived in Sacramento at 9:30 p.m. on Thursday. So that's 4 days, and we're done, and we're there, and we slept overnight, short stints in truck stop parking lots and that sort of thing to get the RV there fast. It took a slightly different route. We took Interstate 10, and at one point we came upon the only checkpoint on Interstate 10 that you experience. And these checkpoints are designed for immigration to look into your vehicle to see if you're transporting someone, or to check your identification if they presume that you might be someone that doesn't have status to be in the United States. So we came upon one of those, and Brandon and I both were sort of shaken by the fact that we hadn't really thought so much about the border as we were making this hard drive. We're busy driving, and we're pushing, to get across the country like a lot of people do when they travel, or we're looking at the scenery. And because we were 50 or 100 miles from the border, being a bit further north, we didn't really think about it until we were reminded and sort of shockingly brought back into the reality that people every day are dealing with this. And that's something that really sat with me, that it's easy, even after spending all the time we did thinking about it, to just get your mind focused on the highway and on the driving experience, and you're pushing through, and it's out of sight and out of mind. That's why we rode our bikes so slowly. And that's why, as Dan put it, we took time to make it through the desert, where we would feel the things that you would feel if you were living outside, trying to make your way through the desert, and feeling the things that you would feel if you were having to migrate into the United States, crossing that southern border. So it was two things. It was a little shaking to realize how quickly we would not be paying attention to the issues of the border wall itself, which was just a few miles from us. But then it was also really confirming that taking time to go slow like we did, and taking time to have to move ourselves across the country on our bicycles was a particular way to pay attention to what we were doing, so we could hear the stories differently, meet the kinds of people that we met. And so it really felt good to be able to be reminded of why we took 9 weeks and went so slowly to get across the desert. But a lot of people have asked, like, hey, how are all your bodies from doing this? Because there's an impression that riding your bike across the country is strenuous, right? And that's partly true. It's a little bit strenuous at times. There were times where I thought, this is the hardest physical activity I have ever been involved in, and I've done some things I think were pretty hard. So there were brief moments where it was extremely hard. A big hill at the beginning that we rode up when we first left the beach in San Diego. Day one, we had a 46.5-mile ride, and much of that was flat until we got to the 3,000-foot climb. So we ended up climbing about 3,000 feet over 19 miles, and it was just grueling. And that was the one point where during this whole 66-day venture, I thought, I don't know if this was a good idea. That
like, what have I gotten myself into?
Yeah. There were three of us that started riding. Two of the three of us stopped riding midway up that big climb. So I was out there by myself, and there's a film crew with us, doing the documentary, and I'm just feeling, exhausted and out of my scope and out of my league, and feeling the pressure of day one. Like, literally can't not finish the first day. That would really set a tone. That would be just horrible. I think we may even have a little video of that.
We have a brief
about
clip.
About how slow we were having to move to get up that hill. Because when you're on if you're able to watch on the video. It's pretty, you're not blazing up that hill.
Yeah.
There's no Tour de France like speed with us going up that hill. But other than that, a few days when we were riding 75 miles through the big ranging hills of West Texas, that was extremely difficult. They were very hot days. But for the most part, we were not under serious grueling conditions. There's a monotony that happens when you ride like this. It's just a long way and a lot of hours sitting. And we would joke on the ride that if sitting is the new smoking, we're really in trouble because we're spending a lot of time sitting down. 5-6 hours a day while we're pedaling along, and it only uses one part of your body, and the rest of your body, is sort of coming along for the ride, literally. So it wasn't painful to our experience, to our bodies, to experience this. It wasn't like, wow, we're getting injured or we're being hurt or anything. We, as Dan put it, we had a support vehicles with us, and more food than a person should eat, something like this. By the way, I wondered, hey, how much weight are we going to lose on this thing? I think I gained weight, honestly. Maybe a little muscle weight, but you tell yourself that you just biked for 5 hours, you just bike 50 or 60 or 70 miles. You can probably just go eat whatever you want. Yeah, you can, but you're not going to lose any weight. Losing weight wasn't really the goal, but it's something that you sort of wonder. Like, I don't know, if you exercise straight for 9 weeks in this kind of way, are you going to lose weight? I don't know. I didn't.
Apparently
I don't know.
not. Yeah.
And other people that came on the ride for like 3 or 5 or 7 days were like, hey, I'm a little surprised. Like, I got home and I think I gained weight. I think it was some of that's some water weight that you're carrying because your muscles work real hard and they get full of liquid, body water weight because your muscles are healing. But it wasn't, we were never deprived, we were never depleted or anything like that. And so
Yeah.
sort of to get to that quick question, we were fine on the ride.
Speak for yourself, Doug. My tailbone is still recovering from.
Still a little bruised. Still got a little little sensitivity.
No, it's
in there?
fine now. But man, I think that was, my legs did fine. I was worried about that. Everything was fine, but my butt hurt so bad after like day 2.
Like your actual, we haven't talked much about your butt. Was it?
Let's talk about my butt.
Like the surface, like you got
no, just
sores,
like tailbone, like just from sitting on that weird little bike,
seat.
Yeah.
Well, I will tell you, I rode a Brooks B17 seat, that they're a little big leather seat and so on. And they make all the difference in the world. If people don't like bike riding because their butt hurts, that's just a seat fit issue. Now, for you, Dan, as somebody who just came into a ride and had to get on whatever bike was available, and you had to ride a variety of different bikes, you didn't have the opportunity to fit the seat to your body. But if other people,
should have brought my own fancy leather seat.
You should have brought your own seat. Yeah. Hey, that's sort of like takeaway one from a ride like this. If anybody's ever going to go, just bring your own and slide, with your post and everything, and just slide it in there, because that would make the difference. And a lot of people feel this way. They feel like, no, I like they're utterly shocked and to the point of perhaps not believing that you could ride for 60 plus days, 3,159 miles, and have it not hurt your body somewhere, your knees or your back or your shoulders or your butt. It's like love and service. It's not supposed to hurt, right? So biking shouldn't be hurting you. It often does, because many of us have misfit machines that we're sitting on, and there's a lot of little adjustments that can be made, and working it out yourself, figuring it out, or better yet, going to someone who fits your bike. A lot of bike shops do this. Makes a tremendous amount of difference. There's even a thing, just to nerd out on the biking side of this, is our only day I promise, where we'll spend time talking about the cycling components of all this. You go to certain bike shops and they will fit you for a seat. You sit down on a hard foam square, and it finds where your sit bones are. And everyone's sit bones are different no matter how big you are, or like I'm a 6'7" person with wide sort of hips. That doesn't necessarily mean I want a wide seat. And somebody that might have a more slender build might have very wide sit bones. So where the bones are on your actual body, the sit bones, that's where you want your seat to rest. And the reason there's so many different seats is because there's many different styles of riding, how much you're leaning forward, how much you're sitting upright, all those things that affect your sit bone. So all that to say, get a well-fitted seat, and it will make much of the difference that you need. And then also the fit of the bicycle, how much your body wants to lean forward, how comfortable you are, how upright, all of those things with the handlebars and just the design and the geometry of the bike, to really try those things out and get it to fit right. And if you're at a shop where they just want to sell you the bike that they have in the shop, which a lot of shop owners will do because they'll make it work for you, that might not be the bike that you want. So I don't know. Look around, try around, ride different styles, and be real persnickety about it. And it's really going to help. Like I had a really good bike by bike standards, this felt road bike, which was expensive and fast and light. And every time I rode that bike, I got off of it, my body hurt. I sold it this spring, got this other bike that I rode on the ride, and I rode thousands of miles on that bike and had no physical ailments or anything. So it's not even about how good the bike is. The bike that I had was like a $6,000 bike that I got much cheaper than that, but I ended up selling it, even used, for a whole lot of money. It was a really good bike. And then I bought a bike that was $1,500, which to a lot of people is a lot, but I'm just saying the comparison between those two bikes. One was not expensive by bike standards, and the other one was middle expensive by bike standards. And the less expensive one for me was, it was so comfortable I could ride it for, across the country without physical ailments. So,
Yeah.
like a lot of things, I guess, in life, if there's some larger lesson in all this, there's a fit issue, and making sure that that fit thing is a real thing. So if this is, look, some of the people that have come on the bike ride with us, they've gotten into biking. I think of Vanessa Ryersey, who now is posting regularly. She's out riding around. She rode with us about 500 miles too. And she's gotten into it, But if other people are thinking, I always wanted to ride a bike, but, here's my reasons why I don't. The biggest is that people just, they find that it's so uncomfortable that it's painful, and it doesn't need to be.
Yeah. Say a little bit about training for something like this, because I've heard an interesting, bit of advice from someone you mentioned that really you can't train for something like this. You just start, and the first couple of weeks are the training.
Yeah, I followed along a lot of people in getting ready for this ride who ride across the country, because riding across the country is a thing people do. Like it's very common in the biking world. If it's new to you, even hearing that somebody bikes across the country and it feels superhuman, there really are a lot of people who do this. Whole organizations that the American Cycling Association runs rides that people pay $20,000 to ride across the country, and they're supported similar to what our rides are. Some people ride across the country with no support at all, just their own bags on their cycle, and they stay in a hotel occasionally or bring camping equipment and camp along the way, and it's just them. I didn't personally see anyone on our ride who was doing that. Some other people along met a person or two who was just a bit ahead of us and who were riding solo like that. But then when Brandon and I were driving the RV back across the country on Highway 10, we saw somebody on the road with their bags all locked onto their.
Well, we saw that family, right?
Hey, you know what? We did see that family.
They had
I forgot.
just
Yeah, we
started
saw
out.
a family.
We were on our second to last day. We were just about to ride into St. Augustine, and on the other direction, we passed this family, a mom and a dad, and like an 8-year-old son with saddlebags and all their gear, and they had just started to go all the way to San Diego, unsupported, just
Yeah,
them.
just them. They're just going to ride with a child on his own bike, and having just ridden that the other direction. It's like, that's kind of just. So I should follow up with them, because they were trying to be YouTube family. Make it sharing videos. I should totally check in, see how they're doing. Yeah. Okay. So right. So we saw one family, and then I saw another person. So, they're not out there in streams of people, but people really do this, and they ride across the country. In fact, there are speed races across the country where they start like in Los Angeles and ride to Baltimore is one of the current ones. and speed races. So they're
Wow.
riding. We rode 3,159 miles. These rides are somewhere in the 24 to 2,700 mile range. We went all the way down Texas. They're sort of cutting across the middle of the country, so it was a little bit shorter. But do you know what amount of time it takes for the winner of those races to get across the country?
No.
It took us, we did 66 days, but we made stops and we were meeting people. We'll talk about here in a bit on why we were doing this around immigration. 9 days.
Wow.
9 days. Daniel Deitrich.
I was gonna guess like a month.
Yeah. They don't sleep.
What?
They sleep for like an hour and a half a night
Oh
for
my
9
gosh.
days. And they're
Wow.
averaging like 15, 16 miles an hour, which isn't all that fast unless you realize they're riding. That's total time, total moving time. That's riding at night and everything. We didn't ride that
Jeez.
fast on hardly any day. These people are unbelievable. It's called RAM, RAM. So Google it, look it up, and see these races. So all of that to say, how do you train for this? Well, it depends. Are you going to ride all by yourself? Are you going to ride in a supported ride like we did that's an advocacy ride? Are you going to go with a group that's preparing, all your accommodations and so on as you go? Are you going to literally ride 22 hours a day? and sometimes these people got on the fast races, they eat on their bikes and they pee off of their bikes. They don't even take time to get off their bikes. There's pictures and videos of them figuring out how to pee on the. I'm like, how long can it really take for you just to step off your bike and step?
Yeah, a single minute, like.
Yeah. I mean, as I get older, it takes me a little longer to finish peeing, but even then, it's still something, right? So, okay, people do this, and they do it in all kinds of ranges. So, but to the question of how long does it take, or how much preparation should someone put in? I was following these YouTube people who talk about their own long distance bike ventures. It's two women. They travel around the world and they make product videos and sort of tips and stuff. And one of their tips videos, it was, how much training do you do for a long race or a long ride? And she said, well, here's the deal. If you're going to go on a 2-week long ride, you want to prepare yourself because you want to enjoy every minute of your 2 weeks. If you're going to ride across country, just make sure you ride enough so your bike is good and comfortable with you and you feel like you know what you're doing on your bike. And the first 2 weeks of the ride, that's your training. You're going to be fine. Just keep going. And this is the thing that people almost find it hard to believe. We had people who came with us. Shane Claiborne was one of these, Dave Gibbons, you, Dan, Vanessa, others who don't ride at all. Abe, Brandon, all kinds of these people. Carol, they're not really bike riders. Some of them aren't really even fitness enthusiasts. They would get on a bike and ride for 40 or 50 miles or 63 miles in one day.
Yeah.
The people who hadn't ridden 12 miles in a day. And we would make stops every 10 miles and have some refreshments and water and Powerades and food and some of that stuff out of the back of the truck and just sort of keeping them going. And they could do it. And then the next day they felt a little more comfortable and could ride again. And then the next day a little bit more. The human body, if all things are working as you would like them to, the human body has so much more capacity in it than what we've experienced in our bodies. And so you really can gear up, and you ride. If somebody's thinking like, I want to ride cross country, well, you spend a little bit of time getting used to stuff and getting ready. But and I did 2 or 3 50-mile rides and one 105-mile ride before I left this summer. Did my 105-mile or 110-mile ride on my birthday. And I did 3 or 4 50-mile rides from spring through late summer to sort of get myself ready. But that was really not so much like, oh, now I've reached a new capacity. It was really to say, how long does it take me? How did I feel when I was trying to just familiarize myself because, we're going to be doing this for a number of days, and just kind of had to know, like, I don't know what works, and how did my body feel, and what are my grips and gloves right. Like, it was just all about suiting myself to the experience. It's not about training. It's not the kind of thing that it's a little different than long distance running. I used to be a long distance runner and run 50 and 100-mile races. And there you really are having to gear up some physical endurance. I don't know why slower travel bike routes like this are not so much endurance. They're really, when we did it, I don't know how you felt on all the rides. It wasn't what's referred to as the aerobic workout. It's the anaerobic workout, right? You're riding slow enough that you can talk. You're not breathing all that hard. You're busy and active and pushing and getting hungry and so on, because you're doing a little bit more than you're doing on your average day.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not straining your muscles quite to the same degree that you might in running, or if you're in a long distance swim or something. Now it's a little different than if you're in an Ironman competition. You're going to sprint a 110-mile race. That's a little different. These
Right.
cross country ones, we would stop every 10 miles and take pictures and stretch and drink, and rest your butt. So yeah, all that to say, generally healthy people can do a whole lot more than they thought, and it's not really the kind of thing that you have to train yourself up for.
Yeah, I will say it's a little different biking in Indiana versus the mountains of Arizona, which was like
Mm-hmm.
day 2 for me. We were doing some crazy climbs, like already we're at a mile high, and that was a brutal trial by fire.
Yeah, I mean, it's and it's also epic. Like, there was something just totally epic about the ride and the landscape and what we were
Yeah.
seeing. And
Yeah,
man,
I've
I
got a
mean, it
couple
was
photos
just,
here I'll put up.
yeah, just incredible um to be in these physical spaces, right? And frankly, at the end of the day, you look back and you see all the things that you accomplished on the ride and all. It's actually really, really quite epic and impressive. In some ways, kind of making it sound like it's totally doable and not that big a deal. Well, it's not. It's not draining or life crunching, or you're just flopping into bed at night, in total exhaustion. But you do finish the day like, man,
Yeah,
we
you've
did a
done
lot today.
something.
Yeah, we did a lot today. It's funny, the 3 weeks that we've been done now, I spent 1 week driving back across the country. I spent a week on vacation in Mexico, and a couple of weekends sort of sitting around. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've done almost nothing now in 3 weeks. I spent 9 weeks being so active and busy, and now 3 weeks just literally doing nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny how fast that can all. So yeah, there's a big difference in, and the landscape and everything is really quite incredible.
Yeah,
Um,
on the screen I've got one of these, we call them like forever roads, where the road goes straight as an arrow and just disappears into the horizon. And you would come over like a slight rise in the road and just see the road going forever. And it's pretty daunting to just imagine that, you're gonna go over the horizon before you
y-
stop for the day. Like,
yeah, and there's a mountain range in front of you, and you're like, I don't
yeah.
know, are we going to bike all the way to that? I have no idea where that is or how far it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, really, really something. Hey, one of the real lessons that we learned was that the surface, and these pictures that you have up there sort of indicate that. So if people are able to watch this online, or if you want to go back, and if you're listening to the podcast and you want to go back and watch it, you can see the videos. The road surface that you're biking on makes an enormous difference. Like, literally what the road is made out of.
Yeah.
We only rode on paved roads, so there were some routes that you could have taken that are unpaved roads, but we rode on paved roads. And there's some that are made out of this chip seal stuff. And I was, having delusional thoughts about a campaign to stop the use of chip seal in America because it was so horrendous. It's bad for cars. It's like a cheap version of of tar that you put over the top that's got a bunch of composite pushed into it, but it's super bumpy. And there were times that we had, 30 miles on this stuff, and it was just shaking your hands and shaking your body and shaking your rib cage. It was unbelievably difficult to ride on. And so it would drop our miles per hour, like from 16, 18, 19 down to 6, 7, and 8. Like the road elevation would stay the same. Just the surface itself was so difficult. And it became this real metaphor for us on the ride that our immigration policies and our border practices, they're like this too, that the road is there, but the surface is so difficult to ride on, to pass. And then other times it's so smooth and so fast. Maybe you catch a little wind behind you and you're going 26, 27 miles an hour. And oftentimes that's not even about elevation. It's just about the wind and the surface. And we can't do a lot about the wind in our world. We can do a lot about the surface. So we're trying to say, like, man, I wish we could just make roads better, literally make the physical surfaces better. And in the immigration and border policy world, that's what it feels like. Like, man, we just have a terrible surface for people to have to cross. And you could say to yourself, like, well, there's a pathway, and people say this a lot when we raise issues of needing to change immigration. Like, well, why don't people just do it the legal way? How come
Do
people
it the
don't just
right
come in
way.
and do
Yeah.
it the right way? Like, okay, yeah, I totally get that. That right way is unpassable. Like,
Right.
it doesn't work. This is the thing we learned. We'll talk a lot about this in the next couple of days this week, that our immigration policies really are borderline non-functional. And when they are functional, they're so expensive, so convoluted, so difficult. It's like riding on a surface that's just unrideable.
Mhm.
And it makes it nearly impossible for so many people to enter this country. But on the ride side itself, man, it's all about the surface level. We became so attuned over all of these days with what kind of surface we were on.
Yeah.
We were becoming like, sommeliers of road surfaces. Like, well, this one is it's got a slight hint of some rumble, and it's but it's concrete, and therefore it's super fast. So we saw so many surfaces. Now, I do want to point out that, yeah, there's a lot of different surfaces, and a lot of them aren't very good. And yeah, we're talking to you, Texas, because it was almost all in Texas. The most horrible roads and the most reckless, dangerous drivers were in Texas. Full stop. It's dangerous. In fact, no one was injured by cars on our ride. One person, Suzanne, unfortunately fell off of a bike and cracked her pelvis 2 miles into her first ride. She's fine now and getting better through the difficulty of a cracked pelvis, of course. But no one was struck by a car. And there are times where I would just think, it's kind of miraculous. We were out there for a long time, and you hear stories of people being hit by cars, and we heard a number of them.
Yeah, while we were just riding into Texas, there was a tragic incident of a truck intentionally trying to threaten cyclists and ran some over, and several died.
Yep. And other people struck by accident.
Yeah.
All in Texas. Texas has an issue with drivers. And funny enough, their signs in Texas say, drive friendly. It's the Texas way. I don't think that's kind of being taken in by everybody. But Texas has difficult roads, surfaces, difficult drivers. But the fact that you could start in San Diego as we did, 150 yards from the sand of the beach, and get onto a road surface and ride on a paved road surface all the way along the U.S.-Mexico border, sometimes right near the wall, sometimes a few miles from it, down to the tip of Texas, to the coast, along the coast, all the way for us to St. Augustine, Florida, which is sort of in the upper part of Florida on the east coast. Had we wanted to, we could have gone down the side of Florida all the way down to the tip to Key West. Paved all the way. Sometimes bike paths, oftentimes roads. The fact that infrastructure exists is amazing. When you just stop and think, multiple routes can you travel all the way across the country, east to west, north and south, on roads that didn't used to exist. They were all put in place, by human desire and human intention. That's incredible. And I was just struck with this reflection riding about how amazing it is that we have a country that is I don't know what the word is I'm looking for. That's transversable, like that you can ride and drive over.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not always like that. Other countries aren't always like that. And that's an amazing asset that we have in this country. We should make those surfaces better in Texas because they're just terrible.
And more bike lanes in general. But
And how about a little bike lane? Yeah. And hey, drivers, bikes get to be on the road. Another point, probably not well taught in the Texas driving system, that you as a biker have just as much right to be on the road as a car.
right.
I mean, the number of times people in big pickup trucks with gigantic exhaust pipes would slow down when they came by us and then rev their engines to blow out all that diesel
Like a
black
cloud
smoke.
of smoke, yeah.
Like it didn't happen once. It just happened over and over and over again.
What is up with like the anger toward cyclists? I
have no idea. I don't know. And I never had a chance to talk to any of these people because they were then speeding off at 90 miles an hour after they blasted us with smoke. So that's a thing that happens. Then on the other hand, we rode 3,159 miles and were taken care of by every driver that passed us. Like there is a sense that the good care and the good kindness and the paying attention of whatever number of thousands of cars passed us, sometimes on interstates when we had to ride on interstates, on small roads, on wide roads, every one of those drivers took care of us. A real lesson sort of in the fact that this country is certainly in a serious set of disagreements with itself about who and how we're going to be in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And yet people took care of us as we drove. And let me just talk a bit about that. The number of unbelievably kind gestures that were offered to us, sometimes because people knew what we were up to. They found out our story of trying to raise awareness around our immigration policies and wanting those to be different and trying to influence voters in the United States to vote based on better immigration policies and all this. And they wanted to support that, and they helped us. So a number of our partners, we'll talk about this on Wednesday, but all the partners that we worked with along the border and the people that are doing great work, they were so good to us and so kind to us and willing to share their stories. But then just random strangers. We were, I'll just give you a couple of anecdotes. Mario and I were riding, it was just the two of us, we were riding out of New Orleans, which is in Louisiana, as everyone likely knows. The nicest people in the United States of America, in my opinion, are in Louisiana. I wouldn't have said that 9 weeks ago. I can barely believe I'm saying it now. Without question, the best treatment of a human to human that we experienced was in Louisiana. Way down south, way down in what they call Cajun country, way down on the coast. These people were unreal. Stopping to help us fix things in our vehicle, on our bike. Like if we were pulled over on the side of the road, like we were at one point, I had a flat tire, and my bike was then upside down on the side of the road, and we were getting the tire off and waiting for our truck to pull up with the spare tubes and stuff in it. And a black woman pulled over and leaned out her window and said, "Hey, you guys doing okay?" And I said, yeah, we're doing all right. She goes, "Do you need anything? Do you need a bottle of water? You want me to give you a ride anywhere?" And I'm like, no, I think we're good. And she said, "Well, I'm a cyclist too, and I know how it can be when you're out here. So I just wanted to check on you." I said, "Thanks a lot." We watch her drive away. She drives up to the next intersection and does a U-turn and goes on the other side of the road, going the other direction. This woman saw us across the street, drove up a few blocks, did a U-turn, came back just to check and see if a couple of strangers were going to be okay. And with all the racial division, all the racial struggle that there is, this black woman saying to us, two white guys, "Do you want to get in my car and have me take you somewhere? I'd be glad to help you." It was just awesome. And we just over and over, we were in a little RV park and we had a little damage to the RV. The RV collided into a post at a gas station and damaged
one of the
bays, one of the doors in the side of the RV. So when it got to the RV park, we had to open it and try to then secure it. And the people at the RV park, and I don't want to speculate on people's cultural and political opinions without knowing them, but pretty clear these folks would have been on the other side of the voting decisions that we've been advocating for, and the reason we were out there. They didn't care at all. They're out there with their own equipment. They're out there with their own time. They're trying to straighten this thing. They're helping us out, bringing other people over. just incredibly gracious and going out of their ways. That happened literally on day one, day before we started, when we also had our first little accident with the RV, and ran into a person who called someone they know who works on RVs. He came over and worked on it for 2 hours, got it secured into place, and Pedro and his son Miguel wouldn't take any money from us. Just they worked on our RV for 2 hours and said, "Nope, you're not going to pay us. Just have a great ride." We hadn't even ridden. We hadn't even started this whole thing yet. So we were just treated so incredibly by people on both sides of the border. The kindness of people in Mexico when we were riding there, the graciousness of people in states all across. We were in California and Arizona and New Mexico, Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, and Florida, and just treated without concern. We were treated with kindness by every one of these people. It has shaken me back into the reality that we have deep divisions. There was this billboard that we saw along the ride, and it was one of those ones that are like "Pass it on," one of those "Pass it on" billboards. You know what I'm talking about? They have a little banner on them. This one has Abraham Lincoln on it, and it uses that quote: "A country divided will not stand." That quote, and something about pass it on. And I've been watching some documentaries about the Civil War, and I know a lot of people talk about where we are in our political space in the United States, and it's bad. Like, our divisions in this country are stark, and they're clear, and there's some decisions we have to make, and there's people in power that are making decisions that are harmful to people, all of that. But we're nowhere close to a civil war. We're not close to 600,000 people dying on both sides of a conflict and people killing one another. And the level of disagreement, from people wearing "Let's Go Brandon" shirts interacting with us, to people who are totally on the other side of the political experience and on the other side of these contentious issues like immigration that we're out advocating for. Overwhelmingly, people were still kind to us, good to us, cared for us, cheered us on in the work. So yeah, there's huge divisions, but there's also something that's there's a goodness and kindness in many, nearly every, let's just say everyone, and then somebody can exempt a few. There's goodness and kindness in everyone in this country. And what we need to do is bring that out every time. Like, not let that all devolve into something worse. Let that devolve into just being about our differences, because there's just unbelievable kindness and goodness. And nothing, and even as good and kind as we are in the United States, the people that we met who are trying to come into the United States as asylum seekers or as migrants, they were equally as gracious and kind and giving to us as you could imagine. We stayed in, a refugee space in Mexico with asylum-seeking families for 2 days, and spent time with them, and were treated kindly by people there who were willing to share their stories and have a musical dance party with us. And people in shelters who had just been returned to Mexico by trying to climb over the wall and were apprehended in the desert, nearly died, and just days after they nearly perished in the desert are arm in arm with us, cheering us on in our work. Like, it's incredible how kind and good these people are and how hardworking they are. And we'll tell some stories over the course of this week of what of the people that we met on this ride, and why it was worth doing it, and why it's worth getting close to be able to tell these personal stories. In fact, Dan, we've got a couple videos. Hey,
yeah,
maybe this would be a good time to share one or two of those. What do you think? We do the Dora one, or do we do the Maria one?
I love Dora's story. I mean, they're both powerful, but I think Dora's captures, really why people want to come to this country, and that it's not a new issue, that for decades people have been trying to get to America because we've built it as this shining city on a hill where you can make a life for yourself from nothing. And yeah. So it's a pretty powerful story. Let's hit it.
when I came in 1980 in July, I was already twice that I left my country and been returned. So I knew the government was going to start questioning, why is she desperate to leave? And you know, in my country at that time, we had the orejas, it's called, the people who would just look around, tell the government who they were suspicious, and the mano blanca, the white hen, it was criminal. They would just go and knock your door or tear the door down, get you out, and then your family would never see you again alive. So it was very scary. So we keep contacting those smugglers, and finally in the last week of June, they said, okay, we're gonna start our journey. Well, we got to the town of Lubille in Sonoita, and the Salvadorian smugglers contracted Mexican smugglers. Well, we were lost the very first night. First of all, none of us had enough water that we needed. We didn't know, we knew it was terribly hot, but we didn't know distances. We didn't know the terrain. We didn't know cactuses. We didn't know anything. We had a death the very first night, almost like at 2 a.m. A heavy woman who had heart problems had a heart attack, and she died. So we had to leave her behind, just cover her in her own clothes and leave her behind. And we gathered around a circle and pray for her, and we keep walking. The next day around noon, a lot of us start passing out, you know, of heat, and we could crying, and we can't do this anymore. We knew we were in trouble. And I remember passing out, and then my uncle woke me up, and he had a jar of yellow liquid, and I said, what is that? And he said, it's orange juice, just drink it. I said, where do you get orange juice with? He said, just drink it, it's gonna save your life. Of course, it was pee. Our men left to look for help 2 days into this journey, and they never came back to rescue us. My uncle left, my cousin left, so I was left behind with this Salvadorian smuggler that chose to stay behind with the women. Well, he had something in mind, and he was not a good man, even alive. And all I keep hearing was that he was gonna kill all of us and have sex with us and drink our sweat, and all the yelling, all the screaming, and there would be silence. So he was strangling the people, the women around me. And I crawled under a bush, and I remember he saying, oh, Dora is dead anyways, but she's a nice person. I wouldn't not hurt her, but she's gone anyways. I remember those words. Wow. And but that's how I saved my life. But in my group was a 12-year-old, a 16-year-old, and a 14-year-old. They were all sisters, and they all perished. They all died in there. And then the pregnant women. And those sisters are the one, you know, that marked my life, because we became friends, sisters in our journey, and they and I always felt that I failed them. That why me? Why I was the chosen one? Why I survived, and they didn't. And I still can hear their screaming, their yelling, and asking to survive, and they didn't.
What happened next when you realized it was okay to keep going, or what happened to him?
Well, he died. He died at the place. So after the fourth day, two of our the people that was coming with me, a man and a woman, were able to made it to the road, and they were arrested by Border Patrol. So immediately they said a rescue and search, and it went crazy from there. I just remember opening my eyes to the arms of a Border Patrol, screaming to me, "Don't die, don't die, don't fall asleep, don't go to sleep." And all I can remember is asking for water, and he was just putting little water in my lips because we were so dehydrated, and then put an IV in my arm, and they rescue us. I lost so much weight in those 5 days, and my hair was burned, and my lips blistered, my throat, and we had little thorns every single each of our body.
And how many of you had survived this journey?
13. Really odd, because 13 survived and 13 died. As you can see, it's still hard for me to tell my story without choking and revive every emotion. But in the past 4 or 5 years, I decided to break that silence due to the fact that it hurt when we were called rapists. It hurt when we were called nothing but, people from shitholes. And I wanted the world to know who I am, what I went through, and what I'm doing, and what we're capable of doing if you just give us the chance.
Works with an organization then that works right in the very area where she was found back in 1980. And since what was the statistic there? 8,000 human remains have been found, in the last over the last 20 years, 25 years out in those deserts. It's there's a whole story of the people who don't make it that's not told.
Yeah.
But she said that, and she said when they were found, everything went crazy, and it was this huge news story that 26 migrants were lost in the desert. 13 of them died. It was on all the news things, the news outlets. The country of the United States rallied around and basically said, that's intolerable. We're not going to let that happen again.
Mm-hmm.
Turned out that those desires have not been fulfilled, and that stuff is happening now on a regular basis. And under the Trump administration, it was part of the plan.
Yeah.
They wanted to build more wall to make it even more inhospitable to travel in places that are more safe, to push people into the places that were less safe, thinking that under the stated reason that would then keep people from trying to enter the United States, basically to use death
as a deterrent. Yeah.
And anytime you're using death and threat as a deterrent, it's immoral. It's just it's wrong. Our country shouldn't do it, and still is, and it really does need to stop. And we'll talk about this more on the political side tomorrow. But there's very few people who spend political energy supporting people who are not in the United States. Like most of the work that's going on to try to do something about immigration is with people who are currently in the United States. The Dreamers Act, people that are looking for temporary permanent status change, people that are already in asylum camps in the United States, all that work. There's the majority of the struggle and inhumane activity of our country is what we do to people who are yet to get into the country or are apprehended and taken back out of the country. And that's where the border practices actually comes in. It's not only immigration policies that need to change, which they do for sure, but it's also the border practices and how people are treated at the border and why they're treated the way that they are. And that's something we want to raise the story around. So we want to get ourselves out there on bicycles to be able to experience all of this for all the things we've been talking about for the last hour, but then also to meet these people and to be able to share their stories.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the whole point of this ride and this work, is to share these stories, because I feel maybe still naively that if Americans hear these stories of why people are doing this dangerous journey, the horrors that they go through to get to America, and what they do when they do get to America. They make a life for themselves. They contribute to society. They become good neighbors. They go to church. They pay taxes. I just feel like if everyday Americans heard these stories, it would change opinions about how we do immigration. But maybe that's misguided. I don't know.
Yeah, but why not be misguided if that's what's misguided, right? Like, why not try? Why not believe that would be true? And, recognizing that negative messages about immigrants has been root in the United States from its founding. We have always been in situations where immigrants have been blamed for our problems.
Mm-hmm.
Any even cursory reading of the history of the United States will remind you of that. So that is a notion that seems to exist in humanity and seems to exist in the United States that we have to overcome. So
Mm-hmm.
it's easier to say, well, we need to just keep immigrants out because we have a problem we have enough problems here in our own country, whatever. For sure. That seems like people default to that. So this other messaging about, no, that's not how it is. It's never been how it was. We really benefit from people coming to this country from other countries. And we're not just asking you to do charity for these people. We're just asking that people have a chance to be part of we the people in this country,
Right.
just as all of us had that chance, whether it was by birth, by chance, or by choice. So we've ended up here in a society that's benefited by immigration. That's a more difficult argument to make because it seems that people are leaning the other way. So there's something to overcome. But Dan, I hope you're right that we're not just being naive, that maybe, we have to tell ourselves the road is a little easier to travel than it might be until we get on it.
Yeah.
We learned that from the ride. But maybe there is the fact that people will come to their senses, or at least when we do. I mean, here's what I'm convinced of. I'm going to steal a little bit of the Friday thunder here. 100 years from now, in 22, we are not going to have a border wall on our southern border. We're not going to have policies that are treating immigrants the way they do now. We're going to be better on these issues. And we're going to look back on this time the way we could look back on the 1920s and say, it's unbelievable what people were doing and what we did as a country.
Yeah.
How were we so wrong on this? This is clearly going the other direction. We're going to be better on this, and we're going to have to be apologizing to future generations for our behavior. So we might as well get busy doing that now, because this total unbelievable process of treating people the way we are and using death as deterrents for the last 30 years in our southern deserts is just morally wrong. We need to and will do this differently. There's no point in fighting against doing the right thing any longer.
Yeah.
So
it might take longer than we'd like, but it does seem like we're going to get there.
Yeah, during one of our calls, Abe Bonowitz, who was riding with us and runs Death Penalty Action, happened to be in Washington, D.C. at the time. And while he was in D.C., he called into one of our Tuesday night check-ins, and he was at the Japanese internment memorial. I didn't even know there was a Japanese internment memorial, but there's a Japanese internment memorial in Washington, D.C., which exists as a stated apology and recognition of the wrong done to Japanese during the internment. It's one of the few times that our government takes responsibility for its bad actions, and did it in this case and built this memorial. And so he's standing there and he's basically saying, like, look, this is what immigration is going to also require in future generations. This is for people to acknowledge just that it was done wrong. That's a precedent in the United States, rare cases, but that's what's gone on, and we think that's what's going to go on in the future.
Yeah.
And I'm now pixelating in some sort of way on the video here that I'm being transported in Star Trek-like fashion off to another planet. So that means we should probably wind up the podcast. Hey, we'll be back tomorrow. Rob Ryerson will be here. We'll talk about the politics of immigration. We'll also talk about some other politics stuff. And then on Wednesday, we'll talk about the faith groups. Thursday, we will share about why do activity as activists like this. And then on Friday, we'll talk about some of the more hopeful pieces of all. So if you have comments, questions, all that, you can send it over to Doug at Vote Common Good or Dan at votecommongood.com or leave comments here in these places. Daniel, anything else?
Nope. A lot to talk about, and it's going to be a good week of immigration. So
Ride Week on the Vote Common Good podcast. I feel like we need a special graphic.
Yeah.
Like a little coming in and out. But we don't have that. So
better than Shark Week.
Conjure it up in your mind, manifest it yourself, and it'll show up in your podcast feed. All right. I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Bye, everybody.